28 is the angel. And by the way, to make it sure that for this conversation, for those that are hearing and are having a chart going, this guy's off his rocker, that's why in chapter 2 of Genesis, verse 1, it says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. That's the angelic host he's talking about in chapter 2, verse 1 of Genesis. And the host of them is represented by verse 28. Because the restoration of the earth wasn't just from the celestial sun, moon, and stars in day 4, of the vegetables and plants and fruits in day 3, of animals and beasts and flowers of the air and humans, but also of angelic, because they fell. Think about it. He replenished everything. And that's why he said in chapter 2, verse 1, and the hosts of them, meaning the heavenlies as well. And by the way, he's called Yahweh Sabaoth, Lord of what? Hosts. So you can say hosts means sun, moon, stars. It does sometimes, but it also means celestial too. We saw this already on our previous study of the discourse, that stars are succinctly in Revelation chapter 8 and 9 seen as physical celestial, comets, meteorites, asteroids, and also celestial beings, not just things, beings, Satan himself. I didn't write the book. That's what the word's used, right? So the word host is used both ways. It is. It's what it is. So people can say what they want to say, but people say that's like they say, oh, Jesus is the Son of God, because they show me verses that say, look, he's Son of God. Yes, I understand. That's all he is. No, that's where you're wrong. He's also God the Son. He's both. He's both. And they go, well, no, I don't care what you say. He's both. It doesn't matter what you say. He said he's both, so I'm going to take that for what he says. So that's kind of how Scripture works sometimes. God will say one thing, people gravitate toward what they want to hear, and they ignore what they don't want to hear, like when they say God is love. Correct. God says that. 1 John 4:8. God is love. But he also says that God's a consuming fire. What do you do with that? What do you do with that? We saw the verses before in Samuel when God says, I'll make alive and I'll kill. I remember one guy talked to Moses when he had in the burning bush, and he told Moses, I make the deaf, I make the blind, I make the mute. And then this guy says to me, I won't forget it, he's a word of faith guy. He goes, no, God said what he meant was, I make the deafness, the blindness, the muteness. Well, that's funny. That's not what he said, though. In the actual language, he means you just studied what he meant. He meant the deaf, the blind. He makes you that way. No, he doesn't. Yeah, he does. Sure enough, does. But don't believe me. Read the New Testament when the apostles asked that very question you're asking, going, hey, why is this man born blind? Is it because some of his parents did? No. How about him? No. Somebody else said something? No. Then why is he blind then? I don't get it. Glory of God. What do you mean glory of God? Oh, watch this. Oh, you can see now. Wait. So you're telling me that this guy sat here and we all know he was born this way, sitting as a beggar for all these years. Until you got to be at the age of 30 and change, so you could walk by and go, oh, and had given him eyesight. You're telling me he was born blind for that one reason, his whole life was for that one point, for you to show that you're God. And he goes, yeah, and your problem is? What? He's like, well, yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. And that's when Paul in Romans 9 would say, and who are you, lump of clay, to say to the potter, why did you make me like this? Like, if you can show me where a vase could say, I want to be on the table. It doesn't say that. You can't, right? And I go back to this before. I make fun of this because there's nowhere in Scripture, I don't care what version that you use, there's nowhere where the red clay called out to God and said, oh, when you stoop down and make man, choose my red clay. I want me. No, it didn't happen. But if red clay could talk, if red clay had a choice, oh, don't you lie to me, man. I mean, if I had a choice as a piece of red clay, I would, please use me to make the first human being ever to form. I mean, that didn't happen. He just arbitrarily, well, to our eyesight, but to him, it's predetermined. He went down, kaboom, and then, I'm a real boy. That's what happened. And then you're like, there's no, yeah, right? You're laughing. That's what happened. And people were like, where's the choice in that? I don't remember reading that in Genesis, where the flesh said, I'm ready, breathe, go ahead. I'm ready now. No, do it, no, now. No, do it, okay, just stay right there and just breathe, and I'll take it in. No, he went like that, he went, and it was not in our nostrils, it says. He actually lifted up our nose, Like he breathed in God's spirit. You imagine? I couldn't even imagine. You imagine the first thing, I wonder what went through his head, you know what I mean? I wonder what his intellect was like. I wonder what that first Adam, that first man, what did he see? Did he see the Shekinah glory of God? I mean, why wouldn't he? He was not sinful. He was sinless. I think he saw that absolutely, right? And imagine what he was thinking, though. What's he thinking?
Yeah, 100%
like,
of his brain,
yeah,
his mind,
yeah,
everything was there. We only get 10, but
yeah.
he had 100.
And amazing. I know, it's amazing, right? Like,
yeah.
It's amazing. Like,
Watchman goes into it a little bit.
Yeah.
How that first
It's amazing.
The power of man and how
Yeah.
powerful he really was.
It's an amazing thing. Watchman Needs was cool. Yeah, he has a, by the way, he has a Bible version called the Recovery Version. If you ever read it, it's pretty good. Yeah, Watchman Nee has I have it, and it's in back here. And he has a called the Recovery Version, and then the reason it's called that is because he takes the New Testament King James isms when it takes everything into hell, and he has the word Gehenna properly used, like in Matthew 10, for example. It says Gehenna, and then at the bottom footnote, he describes what it is and everything for the people of God and all this. You're like, whoa, that's why it's the Recovery Version. He brings in accountability and judgment where it should be in the context of God's love and forgiveness. But it's really awesome. But it's called the Recovery Version. Watchman Nee puts it out. Anyways, okay, so I'm way off topic. I hope I answered your question, but I didn't get to finish like at all what I was looking at, but I didn't think it was going to. Okay, let's go back to what I can with the last maybe, I don't know, couple minutes here. Let me at least finish from verse 42 to 44 of the Matthew 24, and we'll get into the other aspect of it too. Well, I was hoping to get there, but we can't, it looks like today. But in Matthew 24, verse 42, he says, watch, therefore, and that word is the word for being alert and awake. Watch, therefore, what he means by therefore, he's saying watch, therefore, meaning, who's the context of the end of tribulation into the Perusia. In other words, watch, therefore, for Armageddon to happen. You say, why would that be so hard to do? I don't understand. Remember how we're reading this together. What did Luke 21 is the only writer to tell us the emotional mental journey? People were so stressed out, they were fainting. They were so, remember that? They were so filled with anxiety, they were looking for the next shoe to fall. They were expecting the next bit of bad news. We mean there's no water. We mean there's no food. We mean the demons are coming this way. What do you mean there's a big flood coming this way? What do you mean my loved one just got murdered? What do you mean I'm next? What do you mean? Like, how do you live like that and then you're going to tell me that they're caring about spiritual matters of, I'm watching the clock, man, and Christ should be coming any second now. Yeah, I'm so sure you're thinking about that. Because you're not. You're thinking about how to live, how to survive. You're so scared out of your freaking mind, right? So that's what he says, but he says, watch. It sounds so easy. Watch. Okay. Okay. That's like, I don't think you understand. When you're engulfed in your own emotional, mental depression, and by the way, whoever's been, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but on your own, inside your own heart, if you've ever been depressed, raise your hand, because I can tell you I have. And I can tell you that I went through a situation where I was depressed for 2 years, and I can tell you right now that I went to counseling and all that stuff, but I can also tell you that the world just passed by me. I didn't understand what was going on. And I can also tell you that there's no way in the world that spiritually, that's a foregone conclusion. That's an obvious, I didn't do that right. But I'm telling you, other ways, there's no way I was alert and aware. There's no way. I wasn't. I was too consumed with my own sadness and my own, unless you've been there, you don't understand. And if you don't been there, you might go, oh, you're just a chump. Yeah, whatever, man, okay? It's called being human. So when you're there, I'm telling you, you get overwhelmed, you get just consumed, and it's just a circular reasoning of you're trying to fight out of this bubble. Like it keeps on, the more you fight, it's like quicksand. It keeps getting tighter around you, and you push away and it gets tighter around you, like, stop it. It just gets worse, and it just gets worse, and it just gets worse, and your world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I hate that feeling. And I was there, I'm telling you. And so I can only imagine what it's like. I had just a snippet. I don't care what you went through, I care. But it doesn't matter in caring about what they're going to go through. What they're going to go through is going to make what you and I went through combined look like nothing. Because they're going to be every moment of every day exasperated, and God's telling them, watch. How am I supposed to... Okay, how do you expect me to be alert and aware when I'm consumed with emotional, mental burdens beyond my capacity to endure even breathing? That's what he's talking about doing. When you say that word, watch, it makes it sound so, you see, all I got to do is watch. It's not easy for you and me to say. It's hard for them to do that at this time he's talking about, which is in the days of Noah leading up to the Perusia, which he's talking about the last half of tribulation going into Armageddon, and be able to discern that is going to be implausibly ridiculous on your, there's no way you can do it on your own. There's no way. You're going to need supernatural help from God.
So is that Revelation 16:15 part?
No. We haven't gotten there. That's a little late. That's a little later. So that's gonna. So in verse 43, in verse 42, he said, "Watch therefore, because you do not know at the day your master will come." You see, it says day, but it shouldn't say that. It says hour on the left side of your margin there in the diglot. The word day is Hermes. This is hora, which is just a singular. So you don't know which the hour he will come. In other words, but he's playing on the Luke verbiage where he said at any moment they're expecting the next bad news. At every moment they're on the edge of fainting. So he's saying, won't you harness at every moment thinking this could be when the master comes? How hard is it to do that, man? It's so hard to do that in that situation. He says, but you know this, that if the householder knew, at what hour of the night the thief would come, right? And so he's saying the thief, and that's taking, you should watch. He said, watch, he said, what would come, he would watch and not suffer him to break into his house. And the word suffer him, or the word allow, is the word that means to permit. And it means to permit in an ongoing way. In other words, there's an old verbiage that you allow people to treat you the way they treat you. So you don't allow things to go on in a way that's derogatory to your own spirit and emotional and mental health. It's not good. Yes?
Vicky asked, that word comes is plural?
Okay, yeah, so the word, okay, so this is a good phrasing, a good question. So the phrasing suffix is ai, which is plural. However, it's a verb that always is ongoing. It means to come and go. So in the way you can tell, just for your own edification, in case if I drop dead Fred, right? So go to your own Greek word studies. Whenever you see the word in its etymology, in its root word, if it's in its root state, ending with ai, it's telling you it's in that state. It's like saying energy is in constant motion, right? So that's just the way it is. I can't say, and I use energy to put it in motion. Well, it's already in motion. I'm trying to say within that I've directed it this direction, right? So there's certain words in Greek that are already in their constant, consummate state of meaning ongoing. This is one of them. It just means to come and go. So there's no way to use it without it being in an ongoing tense. It's just the way it is. It means to come and go. So if it means to come and go in its natural state, then there's no different interpretation you can add to or take away from it to make it something that it's not. It just means to do just that. It means that it's a ongoing sense of it comes and go. In this case, he comes, meaning he's going to be coming in Armageddon, revealing himself in that sense of Gog, Magog, Jehoshaphat, Bema C, and then on the throne of Israel. Yes?
Okay, Vicky said, okay. Todd said in verse 42, for the word comes, I have written rapture on ongoing could come at any moment.
Yeah, I know, right? That's old school. Sorry about that. Yeah, that ain't right. That's old. That's old. That's where we didn't know what the presence meant back in verse 37. That's what that's from. Because when you know what the presence means, which is the Perusia, remember going back to 1 Thessalonians 4, churchianity teaches, and I used to teach, and all of us thought that the Perusia just meant, the rapture. It doesn't mean that. It just doesn't mean that. There's the Epiphania, which is more rapture-esque when he has an appearing, but when his presence is on the earth, that's his Perusia, and then he has the apocalypse, or his revealing, is when he reveals the glory of his Perusia fully. And that's a whole different thing. So that says here in verse 37, it's the Perusia that's in view. Not the Epiphania, or his appearing, it's the Perusia. Again, I didn't write the book, right? So we just have to understand what God's saying when you see the consistency of what he's saying. So that's why that's misunderstood. We just didn't understand the word Perusia. I'm just being honest with you about it. That's what happened. So he says, but you know this, that if the householder knew at what hour of the night the thief would come, he would again watch. That is the philake, watchful like military guard. He'd be more, again, on top of it, to not allow, and look at this phrasing here, to suffer him to break into his house. Look at the left side of your margin. Let the word for break into. It's the word, it says dug through. It's in the constant state of ongoing. And it means an ongoing digging. It's dia, which means through, and krestethinai, which is to dig. So in other words, to dig through. In other words, You were, in other words, there was a constant digging. It's like the frog in the kettle. There was a constant surrounding of evil. When you were going to and from on Jacob's ladder, you were constantly allowing evil to constantly have yourself get viewed differently each time that you interacted with it, and you kind of justified it. What are you doing? How do you think Satan made traffic of the angels in the heavens? Did they go after the first line? Okay. He had to convince them. Like he convinced Eve, by the way. Remember in the garden? He was more subtle or cunning. He used his word art. He wasn't just one line. It was a couple of lines. He works on you, chips away, right? And so when you chips away at you, it's what he's talking about here. You're allowing Satan and his influence to chip away at you. And that's what happened to the angels. People say, what do you mean by that? You could be a sinless person, angelic host in heaven, have your disposition be subjected to be tempted. You go, that makes no sense. I.e., see Garden of Eden. What else you got? How's it hard to understand? Garden of Eden, they were sinless, but she fell into deception. How? Because her disposition had the allowance for collaborative obedience to be mandatory present. If it wasn't, then she could fall into sin. It's that simple. Isn't that what God said? Do what I say, you're good. If you don't, then you're not. So that's what happened. So I don't understand why it's so hard. Same with the angels in heaven. It was the same way. It was just heavenly versus earthly. Collaborative obedience is necessity, which means your disposition, something about your disposition, and I think it's more so the curiosity part of it, that you can be curious enough to be entertaining thoughts and understandings of ideas that lead you down a path. In this case, he's telling you in verse 43 that it's not one thought. It's a continual, like a wave, ebbing away. It's not that bad to entertain the idea that you're loving on people and I'm going to give your life for them. And that's a good idea, right? Well, yeah. And Satan sells you on these ideas in your mind. He's not here, remember? He's chained for the abyss. Demons aren't here. But they're selling you on these ideas in your mind about how you could justify how to love on people and be compassionate to people. But all instead, he's going, it's not the point of how I'm making sense. The point is, are you focused on what God told you to do? Not trying to rationalize, I'm caring about somebody. Stop doing that. And we all do that. We all do that. We care about somebody or some humans to the extent that we forget that it's not a matter of that. What matters is, what does God say to us? Because when we start justifying how we care as if it pleases God, when God's going, yeah, but if you did what I told you to do, you'd be caring the right way, not just caring for them, but you'd be caring for them the way I would want to do it, not the way you're doing it. And that's a whole different thing, by the way. That's called tough love, as James Dobson would call it. It's not fun. And people would always tell me, if you want to be a real good parent, then you should have some tough conversations with your kids. They shouldn't be your friend, right? They should have tough conversations with them, and out of love, right? And that's just what he's talking about. So in this case, why are we letting our disposition be entertained, if you will, by the idea of deadening us to being alert and aware by just appeasing us with, it's our own, by the way, it's not Satan doing it directly. It's our own subconscious mind, because of the fact that we're on an earth, Jacob's ladder, interacting with sinful people. It's like what Satan had done with Eve. She gets attentiveness towards something that she shouldn't. Why was she even talking to the snake to begin with, right? What was she doing? When as soon as he said, has Elohim said, I'd have been like, stop right there. You didn't say Yahweh. This conversation is over. Why did you not respect my God and my Creator? She didn't do that. She kept talking. Like right there. It shows you that your disposition can be fooled. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So how do you get exiled from heaven? You let your disposition be fooled. How do you get your disposition not to be fooled? To be in the best position possible is to do like the 4 unique parables talk about in your chart, your book. Garner yourself the best you can to prepare yourself for those moments. He talks about that in the debtor and the king, the 10 virgins, darnel and the tares, and the debtor. So I just said that. Debtor and the king, darnel and the tares, the unjust steward, and the wise virgins. Learn the lessons on that chart. I talk about the character traits to take, and do your best to harness those character traits you should have and do away with the ones you shouldn't have, because that's going to put you in a position to not be fooled or be fooled. You can't prevent it from happening. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But you can definitely put yourself in the best position to not sin, right? You can't prevent sinning, but you can definitely put yourself in the best position to not sin. You can do that, right? You can, by having yourself be constantly bathed in God's grace and His glory, His truth and love, and right? So yeah, you're still going to sin. You're just going to, we want to sin less. Yes.
Okay, we have several comments back
Sorry,
here.
I'm sure you do. You probably have tons. I'm way over time.
Yeah, my note, Vicky said, my note comes to take the bride from Aristotle
I
to
know.
Dipnon.
I know.
That was verse 42, she said. That might be incorrect too. Todd said Preston mentioned earlier that verse 42 was the end of day 6. Vicky said, okay, see, incorrect.
Yep.
Todd said, I keep erasing and changing.
Yeah, I know. So he's talking about
Vicky said, me too.
Yeah. So the verse 44, by the way, when he says, the last verse we'll read for today, when he says, therefore be you also prepared, that word is, it's hitomoi, which means ready for that. Ready for what? What's that? That time. What time? The hour he just talked about. What hour? The hour the master comes. Not the hours or the days. He specifically wants you to know about the hour. And by the way, why do you focus on the singular word hour? He's about to talk about it in the next parable coming up in Matthew 25. It's called the midnight cry. I think midnight's at a certain hour, isn't it? Right? So he said hour. I didn't say that. He said hour, singular. And he said to be ready for that. He could have said hentom, hentoma, hentom. He said hentomoi, which means that specific hour. What hour? The one he just talked about when the master will come. Yes.
And Pam said, me 3.
Right, it's funny. So he said about that hour, and he said not just hour, but the hour. It's the article before the hour. It's in the other phrasing as well. So he said the hour, he says, not what you think the Son of Man comes. And so he says, he will come when you don't expect him. That word, expect him or think, is dakoti, which means to suppose or to think. And it's almost like, I remember when I used to love Agatha Christie when I was growing up as a kid, believe it or not. I used to like my favorite was, and then there were none. It was always a favorite of mine. But I remember the Orient Express one. Like, who saw that coming? Not to spoil it for those who haven't read it, but come on, you should know the ending by now. Like, who knew it was going to be everybody collaborating together? You know what I mean? Saying, like, it's like it's one of those stories you're reading a book or you're watching a movie or whatever, and you're like, okay, I know this is the killer. You know, this is who did it. You figured it out, right? You're like the Columbo, and one more thing, you know? And you're like, I got it. And all of a sudden you realize you don't got it. That moment of like, I didn't see that coming. I didn't think that was going to be how it's going to end. That moment, multiply that times like 1,000,000. That's how it's going to be in the millennial reign in the heavens when the foolish virgins are caught off guard going, I didn't see that coming. What, another door opening up and shutting in your face? Yeah, you should have thought about that. What part of your brain cells didn't register when you had wise virgins walking around with extra measures of oil and you didn't? What part of that didn't clue you in? Something was up. I mean, think about it. Something was going on differently. And he's about to go into that in the next couple of verses in end of Matthew 24 about the faithful slave and prudent or wise. He's talking about the mature one who's of 60 fruit yield. Yes?
Vicky said, speaking of the sunmetakoi in verse 44.
He's speaking of, nope. He's speaking here actually of, this is different. He's speaking here of he's talking about from verse 42, from verse 41, by the way, when he's talking about the women grinding at the mill. And now he's going into, like I mentioned before, the hour, the midnight cry aspect of it, the watching for those in the heavenlies during the millennial reign. So he's actually talking about a heavenly aspect of it. So from verse 42 onward, you're going to see him talk about that, and that's why, again, to give you some little teaser for Friday, he said in verse 45, who then is that faithful and prudent servant? You're not called that until after you're judged. I'm just telling you right now. You may say, he's saying, who's going to be that? Okay, if that's the case, then why did he say, who his master has placed over his household? Excuse me? Placed over his household to give them the trophy, not the sterea trophy, but the trophy in due season. And then he even says, happy that servant whom his master is on coming shall find him thus employed. Indeed, I say to you, he will appoint him over all his possessions. The movement is from talking about the entrance into the heavenlies and being given, by the way, that word for domestics in verse 45, household, is the word for, it's misinterpreted in your languages in your King James. But the word, it's the domestics. It means the therapias. It means the things that need to have care and attention. It kind of reminds you when Jesus told to Peter, you want to love me? Then feed my sheep, tend my sheep. So he's talking about, you want to lead? Then you have to care for people. That you have to care for them. And so he talked about that. Then in verse 47, when he says he'll appoint over all his possessions, and that the word there is all tos, it's all those possessions. He'll place him over, which he's talking about again as the bridal aspect of it, as the inheritance and the diapnon. So verse 45 to 47 is actually a movement of those in the heavens who start off with one station and move to another. And so they get elevated from being wise virgins into the bride, and they have achieved an extra 100 fruit, an additional 100 fruit. They have the garment made. They didn't have themselves be naked and ashamed. They actually kept their garment unsoiled, and they actually had another garment made. They did the Revelation 16 and Revelation 19. They kept the garment they had unsoiled, and they also went in with another garment they made from their own righteous actions. And they did their righteous actions by actually feeding the trophy, which later on led them to have the Stereo trophy, as mentioned over in Luke 12, from verse 42 onward, when he talks about that Stereo trophy being the pseudometrion, because you have the pseudometrion is a mixture of different things that are applied when you go on the Jacob's ladder to and from. Yes?
Todd said, what is the movement from verse 43 to 44? Who is the you in verse 44?
So the you in verse 40, the you in verse, down from verse 42 to verse 44, the you is the people in the heavenlies who must be not allowing their Jacob's ladder ministry to interfere with their disposition to be collaborative, obedient to Christ. That's what's going on. And so the verse 45 then begins the avenue. He's specific to the wise virgin who does the right things with his extra measure of oil. Then he goes into a contrast of a kakos slave who does not do the right things, which is brought into view with what he talked about in Luke 19, how he's going to slay them. And this happens at the end of that time in which it's not fun. They get outer darkness. That's what he says here. They'll be cut off in the place of hypocrites and weeping and gnashing of teeth, which the weeping and gnashing of teeth is synonymous with the outer darkness because it speaks to remorse and regret. And the reason why you have remorse and regret is because you realize once you're there and you get evicted, there's no going back. Sorry. You can get forgiven, you can get a reprieve, you can get restored, but not to that position. Just ask King David what it was like to be forgiven. He didn't get a chance to build a temple. God said, tough, you can't do that. I love you. Not happening. Like, oh, come on. It doesn't happen. It doesn't. Saul begged and begged Samuel, oh, don't do this to me. Doesn't, no, I told you twice. We're done with this conversation. It's over. You can't, like Paul, oh, have the thorn. Sorry, it's not happening. There's certain things that God just says, no. See, people say, oh, God always says yes. No, he doesn't. People, that's a lie. That's a lie from Christianity. They lie to you about that. That's not true. Yes?
Todd said, so when does to move from the end of tribulation to day 7?
Verse 40.
It move.
Yeah, verse 40 is the end of the tribulation. And remember, this goes back to, as we're ending up our time together, this goes back to Matthew 24 when he asked the question, the ends, the consummations of the age. This sounds confusing because it is confusing when you read the verse itself when he has the word ends in plural of the age singular. So because of that illumination of truth, of the factual data of what's in Matthew 24 of the question, therefore the ends of the age, he's talking about the end leading up to the age, end of tribulation, and into the millennial reign, the end of that. So the age itself is in between the two ends that he's talking about, the ends of the age. The beginning of the millennium begins with an end of tribulation, Armageddon, which then ends itself at the great white throne going into on the earth, and then on the heavenlies it goes into the Diapnon, right? So that's what he's talking about. And on the earth also the goat, sheep and goat judgment. So there's a whole different aspect of those ends, but the ends are plural because it's speaking of what leads into the age of the Messiah and what will then conclude the age of the Messiah. That's why the age is singular, but the ends is plural. And that's why the transition to your point is in verse 40 is the end of tribulation, and then verse 42 onward is because of what's going on on the consummation of the end of the millennial reign, which was going to focus on the rest of this. You'll see. Does that make sense, I hope? He's like, no. That's a lot, I know. It's a lot of information. A lot of-
Todd said, you said 15 minutes ago that verse 42 was the end of tribulation.
No, 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 I didn't say that. If I did, then I was wrong. If I did, that was a misspeak. That's not right. No, sorry about that. I was wrong if I said that. If I said that, I was wrong. From verse 41 onward,
He
it's
said,
dealing with.
yes, you did. We all just charged it.
Okay, well then I'm just a doofus.
We all just changed it, sorry.
Okay, well that's wrong on my part then. I must have misspoke about that. My apology. Because I mentioned there when he says the hour, he's talking about watch. Do you not know the hour? He's talking about the hour of the. Oh, I think I might have talked about the hour regarding how it relates to not knowing the day or the hours of the end of tribulation. I might have said that. You're right. I'm sorry about that. I mean, I'm sure you're right.
Vicky said, you said verse 42 was last half tribulation.
Did I? I don't know why I said
into
that. I must have.
Armageddon.
Sorry. I apologize. From verse 41 onward, it's dealing with day 7, or millennial reign. That's what it's talking about. I'm sorry. I don't know why I would have said that, other than just, I don't know. Made a mistake. I don't know. Sorry. Yep, that's not right. So that's actually dealing with the millennial reign. The hour, speaking of the midnight cry later on, which is happened at the end of millennial reign, which is going to be talked about later in Matthew 25. So I apologize. If I don't know why I would say that.
Todd said we need to go over
We
this
will.
on Friday. Vicky said, so now the word comes that is ongoing, could refer to moving from the Ariston to Diapnon.
Remember, yeah, because remember it's in the ongoing tense, because during his ministry, don't forget, during Christ's ministry, the only reason that we are doing a Jacob's Ladder ministry is because he is going to and from the heaven. He rules heaven and earth. There's no doubt about that. But he's reigning from earth. So he comes to and from, but not in the way we can see him in the heavenlies. No, we're not going to be able to do that. But he'll be doing that. He'll be able to observe, but not us observing him. But it'll be different. So it'll be on the earth reigning, and we'll be doing that on the earth, interacting at that point with those on the earth, including Christ. But in the heavenlies, he's going to be set aside like that bridal. That's his. When he goes in the heavenlies, when we see him there, we're going to see him as the bridegroom, and that's a whole different wow moment. So it's kind of like that whole adage that's why they get the Western mindset of not seeing the bride for the wedding, because you would have the father. It's in the chart of your, what did I call it? Hebrew customs and manners of the wedding feast. I forget what chart number it is, 13, 14, something like that in your book. But there's a reference to when you do my life for yours, and then you do a trousseau and a dowry conversation between what you give the father and then what you have to make. And then he goes off and builds a house, preparing for you and your new bride, his daughter. That's what the father's doing. Funny. That's what Jesus said, I go prepare a place for you. Yeah, funny. So that's why and then when he says, okay, the house is ready, then she's transferred to be ready for him to the home, to anticipate him to come in. And that's why the rapture, or we go up there, is one, to transfer, but it's not yet the bridal consummation. And then there's this betrothal aspect of him gaining more to be betrothed to him. And then there's the consummation, which when he arrives. So the consummation doesn't happen until he arrives, the bridegroom, and as that capacity. So that's why I'm saying he doesn't go to the heavens in that capacity. It's not possible. That's not. He's on the earth as king and judge, and he comes to and from just to show his rulership is over both spheres of heaven and earth, because it's his kingdom. Yes.
And Vicky said, however, I have problems with the word householder and the thief in the night being on the earth. It's a mixed bag.
We'll go over it Friday. We'll go over it Friday, and you'll have some differences. And by the way, the word householder is interpreted, depending on the Greek wording. Sometimes it means over the household, and sometimes it means over an overseer over all things. It depends on the verbiages used here, but it does change in the King James and other translations. But the wording itself, it does differ. But for the most part, it's going to speak of different things that you're talking about because of that. You have okos, okia, okos, and you have other aspects of when he's caring for possessions or therapias. So it all changes because of the Greek language and how the English sometimes generalizes everything, and to making it sound like it's like a servant and a house, when sometimes it could mean an overseer over others or things to care for. It depends, right? And so we'll look at all that on Friday, I promise. I'm sorry about the confusion for today, or whatever I misstated, obviously, something I didn't mean to do that. So on that, any other questions or comments I forgot, babe?
No, this is.
Okay. All right, let's just still close in prayer. I went way over, I apologize. So Father, thank you for this day, for this time we've had. Thank you for this to continue to guide, direct, and sustain us. Help us, guide us, encourage us, continue to give us this understanding that you would have of you and your word, and continue to guide us into understanding of what that means in our own life and our own walk with you. Help us just to continue to see how you're moving and have moved in our life, and each day is getting closer, and we know this from the days of time. Obviously, we're always closer, and that we just ask that we be vigilant, watchful, not just now, but develop dispositions inside of us and our spirit to always be collaborative with you and seek ways to put ourselves in the best position to please you now and ongoingly sustain that sense of seeking you, striving to always be closer and understanding of what your will is in our life and your presence in our life. Help us to sense the truth and understand the discernment of what to understand and what your word has to say and who you are, again, and what you be revealed to be to us. And as our coming bridegroom, but even before that, we know that you're going to be coming as the Lord and King and Judge in a fearful and frightful day. Between now and then, help us be prepared. Help those our loved ones to do likewise. And we pray for all those that we need to know that have the needs of spiritual and other matters heavy on our hearts. So we thank you for what you do, and always we ask this in Jesus, Yeshua's name. Amen. So that was a long